Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Nice to be here. Purim Sameach. It's been a little bit of Purim technologically at the moment. Thank God I had a backup computer, and there was some updating going on, all kinds of fun things, unexpected. But I'm here. Nice to see your names and your faces. We are going to learn tonight. I wanted to say, first of all, that the weekly description of the class was to incorporate Purim. And so I had regretted not waiting until I got more clarity about the class. And yet I'm trying to do a little combination of the class on letters and Purim, and a tremendous Kabbalist named Rabbi Yehuda Albertini, who was a great Kabbalist from Italy about 400 years ago. And we're going to learn some of his work. We're going to apply some of his techniques and tools in Kabbalistic meditation to our own work at our own level. And so it should be a wonderful class. And I hope you're all preparing for Purim or ready to go. We're about 5 hours after the Megillah reading. And, there's lots of action going on all over town. Fireworks and kids running around and passing out hamantaschen, etc. So it's good to see you all. I'm trying to work out the chat here so it's not in my. Well, that's fine, I guess. I assume that you can all hear me. And welcome, Reb Michael. And so this book that we're going to begin and learn a little bit from is called Sulam Aliyah. It's an ancient, ancient. Everything Judaism is ancient. If after has to be 1,000 years old to be called, ancient. But the Rav gives us a description of many different Kabbalistic meditative techniques in this book. Now, they're not for everyone, each person at their level, of course, but they are something that we learn at least to appreciate what the ancients and the great Kabbalists before us were able to do, and the type of techniques that they used to illuminate their minds, to open up their minds, to bring their Torah into expression in creative ways that had not been seen before. And so, of course, because the idea of Kabbalah itself is to turn ourselves into receivers of God's will, and especially according to the Torah that we've learned, and how to turn our Torah into a tool for connection to God and other people. So in the beginning of the book, he gives us an introduction of all the different chapters. So I'm going to first just read you the introduction to the chapter. I'm not sure how far we'll go into the chapter because it itself, it can be very dense language, and I don't want anybody to fall asleep, including me. So, but the Rav begins that the explanation, the bi'ur darkei hachiluk va'pirud, the way of separating and connecting letters and words. Now, chiluk, lechalek, to create portions, right? And pirud is to separate pieces of letters and pieces of words. So you see, this is a tradition. This is not something that we made up recently, where you take a word like Purim and you start to split it up into different words. Or you take a letter like Aleph and you split the letter into different letters. And when I first learned these things, I was like, wow, this is cool. This is neat. This is fun. This is it's creative. And it's supposed to be. But when you get into it in a real meditative sense, it's a lot more than cool and wow and creative. But rather, it is an expression of God's connection to us through the letters. And he uses these letters to communicate in ways that we're not aware of initially. So we're going to learn. So it's like in the beginning, it's like puzzles and learning little, you could find this kind of thing in other disciplines. But I want to keep in mind that as we go forward, that we're talking about the holy language, Lashon HaKodesh, and we're talking about a language designed by God, not by man, and a language that was created for creating creation. Okay, I'll try not to use that word again, the whole class, but that's what we're talking about here. And so there's a certain amount of awe that we want to bring to what we're going to learn tonight. And then we're going to do some meditation, hopefully, and we'll see how it goes. And Ratzoni Lomar, and the Rav Abutini says, and I want to tell you, Lasot Me'ot Aleph, for example, as he brings, to take the letter Aleph, and you can start to take it apart. And when you see that you have a Yud and a Vav and a Yud in an Aleph, and the three come together to create the first letter of the Aleph Bet. But what it's made of is two Yuds and a Vav. And then, of course, if you take the two Yuds and a Vav and you take their gematria of those pieces of the Aleph, you come up with 26, which, of course, is the holy gematria of the name Yud Ke Vav Ke. Now, in other places, the Aleph can be written in different ways. But that's just one example. V'tevot rabot shavot lehem b'mispar. And then you start to take other words that have the same gematria as a letter or a word that you split up into make other words. So we just did that as well by showing how the Aleph can be broken down to become the gematria of Yud Ke Vav Ke, which obviously shows us that this letter is related to God's eternal name, his creative name. Because Yud Ke Vav Ke, one of the reasons why we're not allowed to say its real original pronunciation, one of the reasons, is because we're calling on the power of creating something from nothing. And if we're not at the level of nothing, which is the ultimate level of humility, if we're not that level of humility, then we're kind of stepping out of our pay scale, if you will, our job description. And we have to have humility about humility, right? To understand that we don't have humility is the beginning of humility. But when we understand that when we call on God's names, we are not just saying words from a book. We are accessing the forces of creation. And you don't want to do that unless you have the vessel to handle it. And of course, the vessel to handle it means the psychological grounding, the foundation of Torah, of mitzvot, of knowing yourself, knowing who you are, and also a mind that's capable of receiving a tremendous amount of spiritual light and not causing damage, which does happen more often than we'd like to see. Okay, and he goes on, V'sod amok misod chokhmat hamispar. And he says he's also going to teach about a deep secret of the secrets of the wisdom of numbers. V'bior darkei hachibur. And then another explanation about the way of uniting letters. So there's a wisdom in taking them apart, and there's a wisdom of putting them together. And everything I say about letters also applies to words. Okay. So the chibur shehu la'asot be'otiot v'tevot rabot. In other words, to make more letters from letters and more words from words. So you see, you're entering this effusive creative zone where however your mind takes you, and as you learn the letters of the alphabet, which we've been doing for about 6 months now at various levels, and I encourage you all to check out the archives and the memory banks of Lighthouse's Facebook page, because I assume that you can access the old classes there. And there are things that we need to remember and relearn as long as we need to relearn them, because we need to remember them and to understand their application. Now, so we can make letters and words from other letters and words. And he goes on to tell us, Ot achat, o teva achat, right? One letter or one word, shavot lehem b'mispar, and how they are equivalent in the same number, as we talked about. Kizehu me adrachim aniflaim, because this is one of the wondrous ways that tzrichim harbe lachochmata gematria, and you need a lot of wisdom in the numerical system of Hebrew. Ubiur darkei gematria, and he will explain more about gematria. And interesting, because gematria is a Greek word, so you see that the ancients didn't have a problem of borrowing words from other languages. And there's a lot about that can be said elsewhere, but not tonight. Now, darkei mishkal, which we learned about before, the way of weighing of letters, and I tried to define the weighing of letters according to different parameters, right? Because we can weigh letters according to their number, according to how they're shaped, if they have 2 legs, 2 feet on the ground, or 1 foot on the ground, or no foot on the ground. The ground meaning the baseline where the letter is drawn upon. And then there's, of course, the weight of the letters according to their place in the tree of life, which we learned also that, that the 22 letters of the alphabet represent the connections between the sphirot, which are the portions of the traits of our soul, right? So your soul is this map of powers, and the powers, though, are connected by the letters. So each of us is in a different place according to our experience and our familiarity with these ideas. I try to explain it in the most, broad, general way that I can, but it is something that you have to sit and learn, but you will be amazed that you will learn, and you will memorize without even knowing that you're memorizing. Now, of course, there is cognitive memorization where you actually sit down and try to remember something. But when you do that, you actually create new vessels in your mind to learn more and to remember more, because memory is not a static faculty. And when people say, well, I can't remember things. Okay, maybe you haven't been able to, but what about today? Are you willing to try today? Because it doesn't matter about the past, and it doesn't matter about whatever memory skills that you have. Memory is a flexible, plastic function of the human brain. And the human brain, we have not tapped into what we can do. We just have to try. And the main thing that keeps people from remembering things, you know what it is? Either a lack of interest or a lack of self-confidence. If I go in to try to learn something and I don't believe in my own ability to learn or my own ability to remember, then of course I'm crippling myself before I begin the class. So this is really a work of self-esteem and a work of confidence that wherever you are, I don't care if you made straight A's at Harvard or you couldn't get out of high school. It doesn't matter. This is Torah. This is Kabbalah. This is for every human being. And I feel strongly about it because I've seen a lot of brilliant, gifted people that don't even know they're brilliant or gifted because the world hasn't confirmed them and affirmed them. And it's important. Because when you discover that connection to Hashem, your mind will change. Your mind will expand. And then when you can discover the connection to the mitzvot, and you'll see how the mitzvot feed your soul, then your mind will grow again. So these are very important ideas. And I don't want to talk about them too long, but I encourage you strongly not to sell yourself short, but just to make efforts and believe in yourself. And so when we talk about these 22 letters and the connections between the 10 sphirot of the tree of life, it is your soul you're learning about. And that's at the microcosmic level. Of course, there's the macrocosmic level that represents the entire spiritual structure of the universe, which of course is the root of the physical world we live in. All right. So he calls this darachim niflaim, wondrous ways that tzrichim arbei lochma, right? We need much wisdom in the idea of gematriot and numbers, the darkei mishkal, the way of weighing things out, asher yitba'aru b'zeh perek, and how he will explain them there. Okay, so I'm going to go forward into the perek. Now you see, that was just the description of the chapter. We haven't even entered the chapter yet. So I don't want to go too far because this is the type of book you either learn alone or with one person. unless, on a regular basis. I mean, we're here tonight. I'm just introducing ideas that maybe you've learned or maybe you haven't. But as you learn them, you will see that we are blessed to have these ancient books, and whatever we get from them is good. But the main thing, of course, we want to get is awe and appreciation of the Torah and of the rabbis who spent their lives learning and writing these materials for a generation like ours. Okay. Now he tells us I'm going to do a quick fluid translation of the Hebrew because it'll be faster for us. The first thing he opens up with is about the earlier chapters. We've been learning the way of the working of Tserufim, right? Which means the letter combinations, which we've also talked about. And these combinations are necessary to come to explain now this idea of the separation and the joining of letters and words. Because when we talk about Serufim, we're talking about the joining of letters as we've spoken of before. We said you take the Aleph, the first letter of the Aleph Bet, and we learned, gosh, it must have been back in November, a long time it seems like ago. We learned the beginning of the Zohar, where it talks about each letter had an interview with God. If you didn't hear that class, highly recommend it. It's really quite fun. You hear the letters talking to God and defending why each of them should be the first letter, and God argues back, and it's quite fun. It should be really a video, some kind of movie. Well, maybe some of you are interested in such a project, but over there it talks about the letters and them wanting to be the first letter in the Aleph Bet. But here the Rav is talking about how these letters, right? He repeats what we've already been talking about. But the Tzerufim, the combinations are what I find the first thing we want to do is loosen up our mind, loosen up our grip on information. What I remember very clearly when I began learning this material 20 years ago, I found myself holding on too tightly. What does that mean? Well, it can mean a lot of things. But one thing it means is that I need to relax in learning, to be in a joyous, open state of reception is what this wisdom is to bring us. And if we get that joyous, open state of reception, guess what? If you take it from the Beit Midrash or from a Zoom class into your life, guess what? You're going to enjoy your life more. You're going to be more open, more aware, more responsive. You'll be happier, and in very simple ways. So that's part of the learning that we're talking about here. And so when you take the Aleph and the Bet and you do it Seruf, a joining, you create Av, a concept. Now we went from Aleph and Bet, which are just two letters that have names. We created a new idea. An idea is a living thing in Kabbalah. An idea is not a static piece of information on paper. It is a living thing. It has power. A concept has power in Kabbalah. Just like the idea of Tuma or Tahara, purity or impurity. And thought itself is not a static thing that's running through the computer of your mind. It is part of the living soul that is your word processor, right? All right. So when we create a concept by joining an Aleph and a Bet, the concept is alive now in your mind. And it has meaning and power. And certainly when you see this, the first two letters of the language created by the Father of the universe are his own signature on the Aleph Bet. Is right there. Aleph and Bet. Okay. And now he's going to go further describing some of these ideas. For example, if we stay with the simplest, because it's easiest to learn with, we take the Aleph and the Bet. Okay, we know the gematria of Aleph and Bet is 3. And 3, of course, is the gematria of the next letter, Gimel. And then you put those three together and you have 6, right? And then you add the next letter Dalet, which is 4, and you get to 10. Now 10 is Gematria Yud. And so you see, we're starting to build things here. And we're starting to conceptually relate letters to numbers. Now, why is this important? Well, because numbers are actually more spiritual than letters. How is that? How could I say such a thing? Well, when I talk about spiritual, I mean they're more abstract. A number has no value except for what it represents, what it is being used for. If I say 1, it means nothing except it's just one of any set. It could be $1, one house, or one country, or one God. So you see, a number is just helping us enter a realm of counting. Whereas a letter is much more complex because a letter has shape and it has a name. Of course, numbers have names too, but it has shape in letters, names. It has dimensionality. It has vowels. It has much more complex combination of information. So when you're looking at this type of Kabbalah, what you're looking at is a deconstruction of reality. And that also affects our mind, the way we look at reality. When we look at numbers, it's not the same as looking at letters. You notice that some people are really good with numbers, but they're not so good with communication. Isn't that interesting? And some people are really good with communication, but they're not very good with numbers. And so you see that it's different parts in the brain are performing these types of mental functions, but those different parts of the brain correspond also to different layers of the psychic creation called the human mind. And those are different layers of your soul. So when you learn a new wisdom, like learn more about, like we just talked about, memory and learning, and an attitude about learning, and an attitude about ourselves and learning. We learn about letters. Okay, maybe you don't know letters and you're afraid to learn a foreign language. I took a class in graduate school, learning language as a foreign languages, how to learn foreign languages. They called S. I remember I forgot the Russian teva. That's great, right? We forget talking about memory. It'll come back to me, but there is a study of how people acquire language, right? And so that study shows that the number one thing that prevents us from learning a foreign language is the fear of of failure and the fear of embarrassment. And so we have to work on that. We have to become more humble, and then we automatically we learn more. That's why you see the greatest rabbis who know the most Torah are actually the humblest oftentimes, because their own learning has humbled them. So, and that enables you to learn more. And so do not be afraid of embarrassment. Do not be afraid when you approach Hebrew, or Kabbalah. We want to have awe of God, but we don't want to be afraid of failure, because that will short circuit the whole learning process. Okay. And he tells us these things, all what we've been talking about, and connecting the numerology to the words. So if you take all the words that have gematria 13, or all this number 13, right? Of course, 13 is gematria Ahad, excuse me, Aleph, Chet, Dalet. Most people know that gematria. It's pretty famous. But you say, okay, Ahad is 13. And then we remember that 13 also is the 13 attributes of the beard, the 13 midot of kindness, the 13 or mercy, the 13 traits of Torah explanation, right? The way we're able to look at the Torah, the hermeneutics, it's called. I love that word, right? Of how to extrapolate meaning from Torah. So you see, the number 13 is this concept that gathers other concepts, or it's really a portal that gathers concepts to it. So 13 also, well, we could think about other things that are 13. And then we could talk about, so this idea of 13 is also the gematria ahava, love. So there's got to be something connection between love and oneness, right? Ahad is one. Love is, and they're both 13. So that automatically tells us, wow, there must be this deep connection between the idea of one and love. And of course, we know that when you love somebody, you're becoming one with them. And that's, of course, one of the most important things that human beings engage in is trying to love ourselves, love God, and love, of course, our spouses, our children. And it's really an endless application of love. So it's all about this becoming one. And so I asked myself years ago, well, if I'm supposed to be, if love is becoming one with something, how do I do that? How do I become one with something? And there's many answers to that question. How do you become one with something? You can, of course, talk to them, explore them, learn about the person. Then you can, of course, do things with them. And this is how we build relationships with people. So that is all contributing to this process of oneness. Now, I have a book of gematriot here. I'll just for the sake of the demonstration, it's fun, right? This book of gematria is really a wonderful tool. You just go to the number 1. Okay, here we are, the number 13. Avi, my father, also means gematria 13. Haba'ah, the one to come, it's 13. Ba'i, bo'i. If I say to a woman, bo'i, it means come, here. That's 13. And then we have all kinds of other letters that are, and all these words are just words that appear in the Tanakh itself, not outside it. Bahag, 13. Then we have Zo, 13. All these concepts are coming from the same number. So it's teaching us about the unity, how meaning itself, how meanings start from one place and expand and grow. So when we do that, Hagav, a grasshopper, that's also 13. There's a divine name here that I'm not going to say the name out loud, Aleph, Hey, and Vav and Hey, which is actually known in Kabbalah as a name for well, it's called Kfitzat Haderech. People think of it as Kabbalistic flying. It's not exactly that, but because the real implication is that space move, you enter a hyperlight space. When you say a divine name, you actually leave the physical, and the physical jumps beneath you. It works better with a good Baal Shem Tov story, but to understand it is important because it gives us more awe of our tradition. All right, and there's a lot to be talked about that, because people in the non-Jewish world are also trying to find out about hyperlight transportation. They want to get to Mars faster. Why do they want to get to Mars faster? Well, I guess it'll be more interesting there. I think it's interesting here. So that shows us how one number starts to gather concepts to it, and the Rav is talking about. Listen to what he says next. And these bring a person to Hasidim Muchanim, and the people. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in the middle of a sentence here. It says, and this type of work that we've just been learning about brings the Hasidim, which is the pious, and the Muchanim, there's the people who are prepared, the Is Rua Hakodish. What? It takes us to Rua Hakodish, divine inspiration. Well, how's that? That's interesting. Eliyahu Navi says everybody can have Rua Hakodish, Jew or non-Jew, male or female, free or slave. Ula madrigot gavot, and to up very high levels. And then he goes on to tell us that it's going to be, this chapter itself is going to have 4 portions to it. And it has to do with numerical values that are going to be split up into, single digit tens and hundreds and thousands, etc. because you see, when you look at numbers this way, you see that numbers are not just tools that we use to count things, that they are like gateways of understanding. And when you think about this and you think about how numbers have been used to create computer languages, etc., it's quite fascinating. Okay, but how does it bring us to Rua Hakodish? Well, what is Rua Hakodish? Okay, well, we each of us has our own idea of what divine inspiration means. Rabbi Kaplan, in his book on the Handbook of Jewish Thought, he says, Ruach HaKodesh is even when a businessman makes the right decision in business and he succeeds. That's also an aspect of an individual's Ruach HaKodesh. And if you pick the right person to get married, well, that's also Ruach HaKodesh. And when a woman is pregnant and she has a dream about the baby and a name appears in her mind, that most likely is Ruach HaKodesh, since we know that in the Torah, most women did the naming of babies. And there's all kinds of Ruach HaKodesh. And there's Ruach HaKodesh in Torah, where they're asking a question in the Beit Midrash, and you get the answer and you don't even know how. You don't even know the question. And I've seen this happen where you'll give an answer that everybody else is struggling with, and it just pops into your head. There's a story like this in the Gemara where Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish were arguing. It says for 3 days they argued a question in the Gemara, a halachic question, and after 3 days they were exhausted. Right, a young guy, I think he was probably bar mitzvah age, but he was definitely young. He came along, and they were and he asked the question, what are the rabbis learning? It's an interesting thing, in Torah, it's very interesting honor act of kavod in Torah learning. You don't address your teacher directly. You say harav, the rav, right, or etc. So it's something that Americans have to learn. It's a little difficult at first because we're really addressing somebody in the third person, even though you're talking to them directly, which is interesting. There's also a side discussion, but so he says, what are the rabbis talking about? And they told him the question, and he gave them an answer on the spot. And they looked at each other; they blew their minds. And then the Gemara goes into the discussing the question. They say, how could it be that these great rabbis who know all the Torah are arguing for days and can't get the answer, and then this young guy comes along and just gives them the answer out of nowhere? So they explain that the rabbis did the digging through the mass of information to extract the answer, to get close to extracting the answer. In other words, the rabbis brought it down to the level of human consciousness here in this world. And the young man just had the purity and the merit and the timing to give the answer instantly, because they did the work to bring it down, but it didn't yet enter their conscious mind. And there's been tests on this type of activity also in non-Torah learning, where even if people are learning a subject in a room, like say you're a chemistry classroom in college, and they're learning months, years of chemistry in that classroom, and then you go in knowing no chemistry, they've studied this, you will walk in that classroom, you will start to understand chemistry faster and clearer than you would have if you started learning it somewhere else. So what is that telling us? That the room, the air, the wall, something is getting impregnated with knowledge, and the knowledge is there. So that also is an aspect of Ruach HaKodesh, that child, that young guy could pick up the answer to a question like that out of space. So that's another level of Ruach HaKodesh in terms of Torah. Rabbi Nachman said it's Ruach HaKodesh to be able to read people's lives from their signature, from their handwriting. The people's lives are engraved in their own handwriting. How come? How does that work? Well, humbly, I offer you this explanation. I don't think it's really part of what he tells you in Likutei Moharan. We could learn it sometime, but off the daf, it says like this, that when you take a pen to write, okay, what's happening? Well, first of all, you have a thought. That's a very high spiritual thing in your mind. And you want to bring that thought all the way down to the physical realm, which is in ink on paper, in letters of a language that you understand. So I have a thought. I love God, let's say. I want to write that down. Now that thought has to go from my brain and from the precognitive level of chokhmah, of wisdom, that receiving the feeling of the idea of loving God. And then it has to go into my left brain, which is the place where it gathers, the letters are applied to the idea. In other words, the idea I love God is just an idea. It's a pure thing. And I'm going to put it in letters. That happens in the left brain. And then I take that word, love, I love God, right? Those letters, now I got it in letters, but it's still an idea. It needs a garment of love. So it has to go from your left brain to your heart. And that's called Tiferet, right? The heart is Tiferet. The left brain is Bina. The right brain is Chokhmah. So you see, we're tracking the energy of the soul from the right brain to the left brain down to the heart. And now in the heart, the idea receives a garment. The garment is the actual feeling of love. You actually feel it. It's not just, we're not talking about it anymore. You really feel it. Completely different world, right? We just traverse from the world of Atzilut down to the world of Bria. And we gave it down into Yetzirah, where we gave it the actual the feeling, the actual experience. Now that garment of love, which is a feeling, which has an idea in words, which is a thought, which is built upon a precognitive idea called love, loving God. Now it's gonna have to travel on your soul. He writes this. I'm doing a little more, expansion of the idea, but down your soul through your arm. Let's say you write right-handed or left-handed, doesn't matter. It has to go through it goes along the soul that inhabits your arm, because you really are your soul. You're not an arm. You are a soul in an arm. And so the idea goes out your arm, and it goes from your hand, your fingers, right into the pen and right onto the ink. You hear this? It's outrageous. And then you start to write, I love God. The way you form those letters is a reflection of your soul, because we just understand that the whole process of that writing took the highest soul idea, a precognitive thought, and brought it all the way down into ink, which is made of several things that you can find in nature, right? Onto paper, which is also a very natural thing, let's say, from a tree. And now how you write the letters, though, is an expression of your state of mind, your emotions, of course, your education in writing itself, how you form the letters, what your teachers taught you, who you copied in learning it. All of that is right there on top of your ink as you write those words, I love God. When you think about that for a minute, like, whoa, right? But you see, when we learn to think this way, we learn to think from the inside out. It changes the world. It changes your life. And look, it's Purim. So, Purim is the time for this stuff, right? Purim is the time God gave us to share ideas. I didn't even plan on teaching all what we just learned, because there's other things we have to learn, right? But it's very important. That's why, my first degree in college was in English, so I'm very attached to these things, and I love to write. But when I learned this, I looked at my handwriting. I said, wow, look, I looked at different pieces of my handwriting, and I could see my mood in the handwriting. And I'm sure all of you can too. And I could see what I'm writing in the car, because I do that sometimes, right? I crossed America in a van, and I used to have a legal pad on a clipboard in my lap. I could write while I was driving. Now, don't tell the police. It was just kind of when you're alone in the highway in Texas, it takes 12 hours to cross the, anyways. So, but if you look at your handwriting, in the morning, you'll see it's different than it is at night. and I can see the letters, and I can see the way you form lines and sentences, everything. It's all changing according to where you are spiritually at any given time. So I highly encourage people to write longhand first thing. If you sit down to write a poem or a song or something creative, I definitely should write with pencil or pen and paper. Afterwards, okay, you'll bring it to the computer. I was going to say the typewriter, but I think that dates me about 20 years, right? 30 years. But yeah, I used to travel around with a typewriter, a little portable Olivetti. It was like my friend. But still, when you look at writing this way, you start to, when you look at people's handwriting, you can also see their pain, and you can see their suffering, and a lot of things. That's also a form of Rua Hakodish. Now, Rabbi Nachman even takes it to another level. He says you can see where people have been by their handwriting, and you can see where they wrote what they wrote. So this is other levels of Rua HaKodesh, and it's all coming from the letters, my friends. It's coming from your creation of language. So you see how powerful language really can be. Oy, and that's only the first half of the introduction of this paragraph, of this parak. But I was trying to, of course, go back to our original idea. We're trying to explain how the Rav could say that by adding, breaking apart letters and words and putting them back together, you can get to Rua HaKodesh, because you're training your mind to go above the normal way we think. We're deconstructing language, and this is the wisdom of Kabbalah, and this is here for a reason. But I trust all of you are people of that understood that the first thing we need, though, to enter wisdom is humility. Reshit Chochma, Yirat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom, especially Kabbalah wisdom, is to have awe of God. And that means I don't do anything just because I feel like it. I don't go out and say God's name like it's funny. These Christians, I have many conversion students online, and they have a wonderful relationship to God, really, and they can teach us a lot. The Jews that aren't, on the same place, but there are certain Christians that think that you can just take God's name and throw it out in the street, and just talk like they say Yud Kei Vav Kei, like they're talking about apples and oranges, and the halacha is about such a thing. This might be a little bit painful to hear, but the halacha says that if you hear a person say God's Yud Kei Vav Kei name out loud, you have to tear your garment, just like somebody died. So that should introduce a little bit of element of awe as well, if they went so far to write that halacha. But for our purposes as creative people, we start to look at language, we start to look at our handwriting, we start to look at the formation of words and letters, especially in Hebrew. You start to see how really intimate language can bring us into our relationship with God. And that's really, what more can we ask for, is to have a close relationship with Hashem. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm close to Him or I'm high on God, or it means it's a different thing. It's like the relationship you have with your spouse, with the person you love. You don't talk about it with everybody else. When you really love somebody, it's precious. You don't go to the bar and hang out with your buddies and tell them about, your girlfriend. God for, that's because if it's precious, if it's special to you, you keep it, like that. You don't throw it out in the street. The same thing too with our relationship with Hashem. We talk about it because we need to share and we need to learn from each other. But ultimately, the levels that we're talking about here tonight are very intimate levels. And so we have to appreciate that and remember that. Okay. How are we doing on time? Well, we have time. Do we have time? I don't even know what time it is. Usually we start at 1 a.m. I should be a little clearer at 11, right? Well, it's been a long week. I'm going to put the Gematria book back. You can find one. It's a wonderful tool. And, just if you're bored, think of your favorite number, look it up, find all 20 concepts that all are linked together. Okay. We'll come back to Rabbi Al-Butini at the right time. Let's go a little somewhere else. If you have a paper and pencil together, let's or a pen, let's use them. We're going to learn some more techniques, and these are techniques for letter permutation, as it's called, or tzerufei otiot in Hebrew. And of course, we're going to take the root word for Purim. Of course, it's Purim, right? We can't forget. How could we forget? Purim is like the greatest gift, because you don't have any of the restrictions that you have on a lot of the other holidays. You can cook, you can drive, you can visit your friends, whatever you need to do. Okay, so we're going to take a piece of paper. I don't know. It's not really going to, if I show you what I wrote, you can't really see it anyways. Just take a piece of paper. Now, those of you who don't know the Aleph Bet enough to write the letters Pei, Resh, and Mem, I'm sorry, but we can't really do it in English. I mean, you could try. I guess you could try. But Pei, Resh, and Mem in Hebrew are the root of the word Purim. But that actually has another root, which is Pei, Vav, Resh, Pur, which means a lottery. The word Pur in Hebrew is lottery. Purim, it looks like Pur Yud Mem, which means, well, lotteries, more than one lottery, right? It's pluralization of the concept. Now we're going to write out all 6 possible permutations of these 3 letters. So Pei, the first one is Pei, Resh, Mem. So write Pei, Resh, Mem. And then below that you write Pei. What do? You flip the Resh and the Mem. Mem, Resh. Okay. Pei, Mem, Resh. And then we take the Resh, we make that the first letter. You write Resh, Pei, Mem. And then you flip the last 2 again, and you have Resh, Mem, Pei. Right? And then you take the last letter Mem, Pei, Resh. And then you do it again, Mem, but you flip the letter Pei and Resh, and you have Mem, Resh, Pei. Now, you see, those are the 6 permutations of any, and these numbers apply to all 3-letter roots. Okay, what have we done here? Well, we've taken Purim is, of course, we dropped the Resh and the Vav and the Yud to make it for simplicity's sake. But if you want to go all the way to a 5-letter Resh, a 5-letter word, then you're going to have to deal with 125 different permutations, and we don't have that much time, attention span. But let's just look at it. Well, first, maybe we should do it the other way. I was thinking. Well, remember, first of all, that Purim means Pur is a lottery. And of course, we're Jews. Jews do not like the idea of coincidence. If we're inside the idea of Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence, and we learn the works of all the big tzaddikim, especially the masters of Kabbalah, we learn that there is no such thing as coincidence, that everything is being controlled somehow through the divine worlds that we find ourselves in. So this is a big number, because a big test, because as we grow spiritually, we expand our concept of divine providence. Meaning, as I repeated 1,000 times, and I'm happily repeated another 1,000 times, as the Kutzker says, where is God? Where you let him in. If you let God into your breakfast, then he's there. And if not, well, he's still there, but he's just hiding, right? In another way. If you let God into your accounting, if you let God into your sports, wherever you let God in, that's where he is. And also, obviously, in your mind, in your thinking. and what we just learned about the creation of words themselves. What's going to happen if you let God create words in your mind? How do you think the prophets became prophets? They were just born in the Bible? It doesn't. No, they did the work and the purification. They paid the price. But for us, we're learning. We're like first graders here. Let's keep it small. But remember the idea of Purim. What's it talking about? A lottery. And Jews don't like lotteries. We're not even allowed to gamble if it is for sake of making a living. You're allowed to play penny poker with your friends and stuff. But in terms of the halacha of gambling, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said you're allowed to buy one lottery ticket per week. So you're not one of these people, you ever see, you walk into the place to buy a lottery ticket, and there's some guy reeling off 100 lottery tickets, man, talk about throwing down cash. But still, so our nature as Orthodox, I've used the word Orthodox very kind of like in neon letters, okay? Because Orthodox is a very broad word, and what is Orthodox to one person might not be the same to another, but doesn't matter. For our purposes, we have to look at all Jews as the Rebbe said, Shomrei mitzvot, where everybody's keeping some mitzvah somewhere, even if they don't know it. Okay? So that's how broad we want that category to be. We don't want to make distinctions amongst Jews, especially distinctions like, oh, he doesn't wear a mask, or he got a shot, or this is not good stuff. Okay, but back to our work here. So we take Purim, the idea of the lottery, and we look at the Megillah. The Megillah, there is no mention of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. God's name does not appear. That means he's hiding. He's hiding in the Megillah. And of course, we know if we just think a little bit outside the box, we say, of course, God is hiding in reality, just like he's hiding in the Megillah. So what happens when God hides? The human imagination immediately jumps to, well, maybe there isn't a God. Or maybe God just took a hike across the universe and he left us alone. Or maybe God is upset with us and he turned his back and he's never going to come around again. This is how the Yetzer Hara wants to make us think as people of faith. But when we understand, no, God is in the Megillah. The rabbis teach in Masechet Megillah that every time the word king appears, Melech, it means God. It's just, again, it's a label, it's a garment to hide the presence. So when we understand that, and we understand that God is hidden in reality, then we understand we've just allowed the introduction of the idea of coincidence, because that's what a lottery suggests. We're going to cast lots, and whoever gets the long straw gets to drive first, or I don't know, whatever you're casting lots for. Well, in the case of, Esther was brought in as like all the other probably hundreds or thousands of who knows how many women went through Achashverosh's Beit Nashim, the house of the women, and 6 months of perfuming and 6 months of anointing, and they had to be a world-class model just to walk into the palace. But nonetheless, we know that God chose Esther because he wanted Achashverosh to choose Esther for the sake of the redemption of the Jewish people at that time. But she happened to be there. She happened to be exiled from Jerusalem. She happened to be from the family of Mordechai. Mordechai happened to be from the family of Shaul HaMelech. Is this all just coincidence after coincidence after coincidence? And you track Shaul back all the way to the king Agag of Amalek, who is the arch enemy of the Jewish people. And here we go again. We got Haman jumping onto the stage, who's also linked to the tribe of Amalek. Now, Amalek also goes, we track Amalek back, you'll end up at Esav, right? And so you see that, oh, that's interesting. Esav was Jacob's twin. So what's happened here? The arch enemy, the root of the arch enemy, was born in the same womb of Rivka Imenu as the great sage and patriarch Jacob. That's astounding if you think about it. Okay, but Purim is this whole idea of the hiding of God's presence in order that it can be revealed through nature, through our reality, and not speaking from the clouds on Mount Sinai, because not everybody can handle the lightning and the thunder and the it's too much. So, and of course the revelation was different, and the purity level was different, and the desperation was different. Everything was different. But that's why Rabbi Nachman says all redemptions began with Egypt in the Egyptian paradigm, and he stopped his sentence in the middle, and everybody understood that he meant, and now the redemption paradigm is Purim. How the Jews are saved is not like Moses going in as a prophet and telling Pharaoh, let us go. Nobody went over to Achashverosh and said, let your Jews go. He's like, what are you talking about? They're free. As a matter of fact, I get a lot of taxes from my Jews. I don't want to, but I can't hold them in place. So you see, the paradigm of freedom changed. From Pharaoh was a tyrant who wouldn't let the Jews go. He made them, enslaved them to a workforce. Achashverosh was, is a sababa guy. Let's have a big party, 6 months of drinking. What's that going to do to your brain? So the Jews were free, so to speak, in Shushan and in Persia, of course, which was what we call Iran today. And yet they weren't so free because they were culturally bound to the mother nation of the Persians at the time. And they even partied with the cups, the golden cups of the Beit HaMikdash, which was a huge mistake. Huge mistake. You cannot drink from the sacrificial cups that were used in the Mikdash and have a party with all the action going on over there in Achashverosh's palace. So that's what kicked the whole redemption. So you see a very fascinating concept. Our redemption was kicked into action by our fall. You hear that? Jews in Shushan went to party for 6 days or 7 days in the palace with the king, and he brought out the golden goblets of the Mikdash, and people were drinking. Now that's the time you get on your donkey and you ride home. You get out of there. And I don't know what every Jew did that was in that party, but these were huge parties, obviously. It wasn't 100 people, it wasn't 500 people, maybe 20,000 people. But nonetheless, what happened, and the decree came down, and the power was given to the other side to bring the prosecution against us. But that very moment of prosecution actually enabled us to set ourselves free from the Persian incursion. Oh, that's good. The Persian incursion on our culture, and to make the Jews go back to committing ourselves to the Torah and to Jewish life and to the real values that God wants us to live with. And then the whole story worked its way out. Okay, but you see, I kind of gone far afield from our little letter exercise. What we can do in meditation, you take any 3-letter root and you cycle it through your head. And that sounds like hard, okay? But it actually isn't. And I began doing these kind of meditations a long time ago. And they really attach you to an idea, and they expand your ability to see ideas. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through this a little bit, and it's not terribly profound, but I think you'll enjoy. So we start out with the idea of Pei Resh Mem for the root of Purim. And what do we have over here? Look down our list of six different permutations. Faram Lifrom, the first one, Pei Resh Mem. Lifrom is a verb in Hebrew for a Kohen that lets his hair grow long. Let your hair grow long, baby. It's the 60s. That's one idea. But if you split the word, look what happens if you split the word. Remember, the Rav was just telling us about splitting letters and words. What do you get? You get Pei Resh Mem. Pei is the mouth. Resh Mem means Ram. It means exalted. So it can be understood that Purim is about the exalting the mouth. And of course, that's what Mordechai did when he screamed out in the streets. And that's what Esther did when she went to bat for the Jewish people and saved us. She lifted up her voice. She lifted Pei Ram. She spoke of high things. So right there, we just learned something new from the word Purim. Now, just if we go back to the 5-letter, you can split it right there. Pur, lottery, Yud Mem. Well, Yud Mem means Yam, a sea. The sea of lottery. What does that mean? Or the lottery of the sea. What does that mean? Well, if we understand, as what we learned before, that Pur is this idea of coincidence. Well, you ever been out? I was a scuba diver once. If the boat leaves, you definitely feel alone. You definitely feel like what's going, where'd he go? You come to the surface and the boat's not there. You feel like you're lost at sea. That's what coincidence does. If I don't have faith in God, then I can put my faith in a million things and I'm just lost at sea. Poor Yam. Okay, that's my own little take as we're speaking. But to just share it with you. So this is how it works. This is how the miracle of Hebrew. Let's go down another one. Okay, well, the next one is Pei Mem Resh. What can we do with Pei Mem Resh? Famar. I didn't look up in the dictionary Pei Mem Resh if there's actually a word. I could do that right now. I don't believe there is. That's why I didn't do it. But I've been wrong before. That's for sure. So we look in the dictionary. You guys probably be faster on the Hebrew on the computer, but I've got my dictionaries handy. They're also my friends. Pei Mem Resh. We got anything over here? This is how I found out that Plishtim, the word for the ancient tribe, the Plishtim, which of course today is kind of connected to Palestine, the Plishtim. The word liflosh in Hebrew, I just looked it up. It means to occupy. Now, isn't that interesting that the Palestinians call us the occupiers and the EU calls us the occupiers? And yet the root of their name is liflosh, to occupy. Is that not a piece of divine understanding? But, we don't want to make enemies. We're going to be true and they'll figure it out. Okay. Peresh Mem. Pei Mem Resh, excuse me. A little faster, a little faster. We'll get there. I'm sorry I didn't do more of this homework before. Forgive me. It's Purim. And I don't usually drink too much on Purim or at all, depending, but because I see that it takes me where I don't need to go. And it, why take something when you don't need it, right? Well, as I suspected, there is no root to Pei Mem Resh. Okay, no problem. But if you take the word and split it, what happens? Pei Mar. You split the letter again between the Pei for mouth and Mem Resh, Mar means bitter, a bitter mouth. Interesting. We just flipped the whole idea from an exalted mouth to a bitter mouth just by splitting the word. And so on and so forth. You go through all the letters and all the permutations. You'll be there for another 70 years. Promise. But you see how I want to share this with you, because this is innate wisdom that's coming to us. And if, all we have to do is be a little creative and sit down and pay attention and look at the roots, and you have your dictionary, you have your gematria book, and the next thing you know, things are coming to you. Ideas, interesting ideas. For example, the next one, Resh Pei Mem. Or let's go down to the last one, mem resh pei. That's easier. Mem resh pei, merape, to heal. Same roots, merape. Now rofe, the real root of to heal is resh pei hey, but the mem in the beginning of the word turns it into a verb. But you still see an illusion here. Right? And if you go another word, look at the word the pei rofe, the mouth that heals, pei rofe, is if you want to go another whole level, which you can do, it's fun to do what I call translingual interpretation. We go into another language from pei rofe, the mouth that heals, and it becomes the root of the word professor, the one who professes, right? So this is all very well and done, and I hope it's interesting to you, and I encourage you. But it's something that it's the type of wisdom that if you use it in a meditative state, then it becomes something else. Okay, it becomes in a state of attachment to Hashem. Then your mind becomes a tool for Hashem to do things, to teach you things, and to open up our mind to understanding that we didn't have before. And that's exciting. That's what we're here to do. I didn't, when I first encountered this wisdom 30 years ago, I was like, whoa, this is what I've been looking for all along. I didn't even know it was my own backyard as a Jew. So that gave me a lot of excitement and awe and appreciation for what we've been given. Now we're looking at 1:15 already. Wow, or 12:15. I don't know if we have a time for meditation. Is there any questions or comments anybody wants to share? It is Purim, so we can open it up.
Hi, Rav Shira. How are you? It's Cindy Rand. Thank you so much.
How you doing?
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you a question. I want to ask the Rav a question. So why on Purim has it become such a crazy situation where people are drinking to excess? And obviously this year and last year, maybe not the same, but in previous years, people would get drunk and drink so much. I mean, even my own kids, it's what's so frustrating. Why was this an accepted custom? And then I also wanted to ask another question.
Sure.
Why, we are looking at the Purim story and how the Jewish people got saved, and we have to work together in order to get ourselves Yeshuot. You look at what's going on in the world today. I don't want to bring anybody down, but I cannot understand the level of dissension that's going on. So I mean, we look to our leaders. Dissension, like what you were saying. This person's wearing a mask. That person didn't take a vaccine. So it's very disturbing to me.
It is. This is exactly what the Yetzer Hara does. This is his job. And the answer to your other question, if I can be a little bit broad about it, is the same thing. The Yetzer Hara has tools. One of his tools is to exaggerate mitzvot. See, because if a Jew is a good Jew and keeps the Torah and mitzvot, he has very little access to a Jew, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, as we call him, which Rabbi Nachman calls the power of imagination, which I call the power of exaggeration. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what does the Yetzer Hara do with a Jew that keeps Torah and mitzvot? Whatever level you're at, he makes you exaggerate your very practice. So I'll become more firm than everybody. I'll be more kosher than everybody. I'll pray until I lose my voice. I'll drink on Purim until God forbid, people can die if they drink too much. Right. So that's the Yetzer Hara. That's what he does. He exaggerates a mitzvah and takes it outside the balanced, intended practice that God gave us, and makes it an exaggerated, fanatical, socially unacceptable behavior. Mm-hmm. The Torah teaches us to honor our father and our mother. It's the first mitzvah. Now, I know a lot of people that when they become religious, they won't eat at their parents' house. That's not called honoring your father and mother. Honoring your father and mother is in the 10 Commandments. Eating off kosher plates is way down the list. You go out and buy paper plates and you eat can of tuna at your parents' table if you're so worried about their food. But I know people that wouldn't even enter their parents' house because of their kashrut. That's insane. That's exaggerating the mitzvah and destroying a family in the name of God. And that's exactly what we don't want to do. The whole point of religion is to bring us closer together. So that's another thing the Yetzer Hara does. He exaggerates, and so then it applies to any aspect, any mitzvah you see. The Yetzer Hara will try to jump on a person and make him exaggerate it. You know, the laws of modesty. There's women walking around in Jerusalem like with a black tent on their head. I don't think that actually attracts more attention than than a woman who dresses like a normal secular person. And it doesn't look good in the eyes of people who are thinking about Judaism as a potential practice. You see people that are exaggerating something like that. It makes you think that religious Jews are off the wall.
Right.
God forbid. And to take such a beautiful practice as Judaism and to exaggerate it into such forms, okay, you want to be modest and sneer so to that level, then don't go out. But I'm just picking things off the top of my head. Maybe I have my own. I don't, I'm sure they're wonderful people, but they put little girls in these black whatever,
Yeah.
So that's the answer on that. And I think that this is part of the Yetzer Hara's work is to separate people, because how did God create the world? He took separate parts and he joined them together. And so this is also what we look at. If you look at the 10 plagues in Egypt, they were all designed to separate the aspects of society in Egypt, to separate the Jews from the Egyptians, and to separate the Egyptians from the Jews. But then it went on further and further until that, well, what happened. But the whole point, the Yetzer Hara is always looking to keep people not together, because we're more powerful when we're together, as individuals, as couples, as families, as communities, as nations. That's exactly why there was so much difficulty in getting to Eretz Israel in the past, and even look today, what's happened again. Because if all the Jews get to Israel, we're going to be a force to be dealt with that they don't want to deal with. They meaning the other side, not any one person or any individual. I'm not pointing fingers at any of the conspiratorially groups that are so easily, labeled, because it's all the same place. Evil is evil, and wherever it appears and wherever it comes from, it's all going back to the same root in the dark side of the light, which we call, the potential for evil was created when Adam and Eve did what they did in the garden, and they created the duality. So it all goes back there. And of course, I'm giving you a very quick answer to a very complex thing, but I think we need to understand it that way. We need to be smart about it. If you try to, I think the best thing you can do is to talk to your kids and be with them, and and explain to them that they're not going to drink too much. They give a little bit, whatever it is. Now, I don't know what age group you're talking about. I don't know about your culture, their friends, the community, the rabbis. All those factors are part of that issue.
Right.
And I know what you're, Cindy, where are you right now?
So right now I am
No,
in
I mean,
Sullivan. Yeah,
geographic.
I'm in New York, but my kids, like, we live in the 5 towns, so
Okay.
there's a lot of great things in the 5 towns, but like any other, communities, there's a lot of other stuff, a lot of excess, and there's a lot
Right,
of,
it's America. It's a wealthy
yeah,
community.
yeah,
It not You don't have to say too much, but the reason I ask is because that you have options, and the first option I would think of is to call the parents of the other kids that your kids are going to be hanging out with,
right,
to have a collective force. If your kids and your kids' friends know that their moms and dads are united about this issue, they're not going to have the same inclination to drink ridiculously. There's other ways you can take it too. You can say, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to drink with you. Let's make a l'chaim. Talk about drinking. What does it really do to your brain? What does it do to your chemistry? What does it do to your attitude? What does it do to your sense of modesty? What does it do to your sense of conscience? And I mean, look, I just went to a shiva call of a good friend of mine who is a really righteous rabbi and holy teacher, and his wife went to the Marat Machpelah in a car. She was hit by a drunk driver, and she's not with us anymore. This happened last week. Now, it's a horror story, right? But it's not an unusual horror story. And why was it horrible? Even more horrible is because the guy didn't even he was 18 years old, and he took his father's car without permission, and he didn't have a license, and he just started driving around, and again, they got drunk with his friends, and he rammed into a car.
Wow.
So the kids need to hear those stories before they go out and party.
Terrible.
It's a joke. And that's the kind of, and they shouldn't be in cars with other people. The guy who did it, that was bad, but can you imagine his friends who went in the car with him?
Wow, it's terrible.
Communication is the solution, and honest communication and compassionate communication. And you see, what does communication do? It brings us together. And what did I say earlier? The Yitzra, he wants to separate us, always. That's his job.
Right.
And unfortunately, we see what's happened in the world, and this whole virus and the reactions to it, and the responses, and the medicines, and the doctors, and the lawyers, and it's endless. There's only one place to go, and that's straight to your faith in Hashem, and find out what you need to do. Because I hear of healthy people that get sick and die, and I hear of unhealthy people that don't even feel it, and you hear of the opposite. And the same thing with the result, responses to the vaccinations. So there is no claw, there's no rule. So right. When I see that, I say, this is God telling us it's about your relationship with me. And this is what Moses said to the Jews. He said, Mi la Hashem alai. You want to go with Amalek? You want to go with Baal? You want to go with Pharaoh? Go. But whoever wants to be with Hashem, you come to me. It's right. A vote of faith. It's about faith. And okay, well, we're doing the best we can. But I say, sit down your kids, talk to them about it. But like with not like lecturing, but more like sharing, sharing information. I want you guys to know something, how much I love you and how much I care about you. And I know you want to go out and drink and have a good time, but there's some rules here. Right. But first thing, I don't know who they hang out with, but my kids, I knew they were going to go out with their friends and drink. And so what I did is I gave them a place to do it. I said, you do it here at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? They're not even drinkers. They saw, bad examples, and they also I gave them that sense of responsibility for themselves. I felt like, and that, okay, I'm sure I wasn't perfect, but I felt like if they're going to go out and drink in strange places, that's worse. Drink here, and right. And they're going to have a different attitude. They're not that hefkerut, you know what I mean by hefker. And so
thank you. Yeah,
I hope this is useful, Cindy. I think that
thank you, Rabbi.
I have to pray for them and pray for all the children, because it is a dangerous thing. They don't understand how easily they get poisoned by alcohol, and how terrible things happen so quickly when people get behind the wheel, or even on a bicycle. I mean, right. It's not a joke.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
But we should end with something a little more happy.
Yes. Thank you.
Because there is it is a day of joy, a day of a pure gift, what we call the matanat chinam, a gift that God gave just because, right? And not because we're good Jews, or because we're Orthodox, or because we keep certain, no, there's no calculations on God's goodness. He just is good, and he's giving good to the whole world. And Our job is just to put out our cup and receive. And so, we have to remember not to make the calculations, because that's also the Amalek head, the Haman head of calculating. Oh, I did this good, I should get this. Oh, I didn't do that. Oh, I got bad. Oh, look, all this calculation will drive a person insane. It is not the way we serve God, with tmimut, with innocence and pshitut and simplicity. I'm not interested in calculation. That's his business. It's not my business. My business is to take every moment and do the best I can with that moment. So I want to bless all of you to live in the now, and the simplicity, the purity of Purim, and the joy of the redemption that's happening worldwide as we speak. And in the midst of that redemption, there's also darkness. There's also challenges and tests. But this is what the Yetzer Hara, he says, only there to push us closer to Hashem and to make the right choices. And those choices are sometimes they're not easy choices, but we have a source to get our answers. And that's why we take all our questions to Hashem. We pray, we meditate, we daven, we let go, we let him answer us. We receive. And that's the ultimate what Kabbalah is for, to teach us how to receive from that deep root in our soul. So we should all be blessed with that reception of the truth, and all the things that we do, whether it's the little things or the big things, it's all the same to Hashem, because he's there for us. He loves us. And he wants us to succeed. And we're built to succeed. That's what the Jewish people need to succeed, to sanctify his name. And that's why Purim happened, and it's going to happen again. It's happening now. And in the end, in the end of all this darkness that we see around the world, our mouths are going to be filled with laughter. There's going to be the complete redemption, and it's time, step by step, just like the rabbis say in Mesechet Brachot, the Geula comes on like a slow dawn. Moment by moment, the light gets brighter and brighter. So we don't get blinded. We can see it all. God bless you all. We'll be back on the Lighthouse next week, and we'll continue our work with the letters, the holy letters, and our meditations. And you should have a wonderful Purim and enjoy and appreciate it. And, the drinking is only to open the mind. You only takes one drink, 2 drinks. I don't believe in this. The Ad Lo Yada, it says you should drink until you don't know the difference between Mordechai and Haman. Well, maybe 1 drink is enough to get there. I don't believe that it's about poisoning ourselves. I believe it's about just letting the mind open with a simple little bit of alcohol will open the mind. And I can see that, wow, it really is all good. And when we get that, the mitzvah is done. So God bless you all. We'll see you next week.
Amen.
Purim Sameach.